Okay, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us this evening, and hopefully this would be a nice, valuable session for you to listen into, ask some questions, and reflect upon and think about women and girls in sport as coaching, and also for people within the game as well. Really happy to have a really sort of interesting mix of people on tonight. People who have experience playing in the game, coaching, and from different sports. So I will move on quickly as much from away from me as possible. So if I have a little bit of an introduction from each of the panelists today. So I'll pass on to Mel to give a quick introduction.
Hi everybody, evening. Mel Mansfield here. So I'm sitting in an office at the University of Hertfordshire, about to take a session actually. So my background in coaching is that I started to coach. This is probably relevant to this evening because I was pregnant and I'd been a player. I'd been an England player in the 90s, and in 2000 I felt terribly guilty that I couldn't play anymore, or for that season anyway. So little did I know what I was letting myself in for, and I just did my level 2 coaching award, and I've been in coaching ever since. I ended up at kind of the elite level quite quickly in 2008, and I've been in Super League netball since 2008. I worked at Surrey Storm for 5 seasons and Mavericks for 1 season, and then I've been at Wasps ever since. So this is season 4 for me. I'm a university lecturer in nothing to do with sports, so I'm part-time coaching, part-time lecturing, and I'm in my 7th season of running the University of Hertfordshire netball programme. And we've been hugely successful, 3 Bucks titles back to back, so working with lots of international athletes both at Wasps and at University of Hertfordshire. I'll let somebody else speak.
Great, thanks Mel. I'll pass it over to Fadi.
Hi, I'm Fadi Mazloom. I am the current first team manager for Stevenage Women. I've been in the role only about 7 or 8 games now. Sort of took over from a previous manager that wasn't producing results. I've been in the game for maybe over 5 years now. Within women's football, started off at grassroots, and I'm currently on my UEFA B course at the moment.
Great, thanks Fadi. And finally over to Sian.
Hi, I'm Sian Lingam. I obviously started as a football player, so I was playing for Arsenal in England, and then I moved into coaching while I was playing actually. So mostly with Arsenal, I was doing Centre of Excellence in the academy, and I've worked with the Welsh women's national team, and I'm currently the English schools under 15s girls coach manager.
Great, thanks Sian. I think just to sort of start off with, just to sort of give an introduction around how each of you sort of got into coaching roles. I know Mel sort of touched on it a little bit there, around sort of being pregnant. How do you want to sort of go in a little bit deeper and explain a bit about that?
Yeah, so I guess I started to naturally kind of help the team whilst I was unable to play. In fact, I pushed the limits in terms of playing and the regulations, because, you know, and I think this is, again, it's relevant to this evening. At what point is it a good time to have a baby when you're a player? And I'd left it as late as I possibly could, really. So I think that was the first thing, that I felt this kind of need to still be involved. And my kind of view about performance and elite sport is that once you're in, and I can't stop myself. It's addictive. And I guess that at that point, as a player, I didn't want to be out of it. So I guess it was for selfish reasons, and I don't remember thinking it was for selfish reasons, but I remember thinking, oh, well, I need to stay involved. Well, I can't stay involved unless I get qualified. So that's how I kind of very early started. I didn't have any ambition at that point at all. I literally thought, in order to help this team, I need a qualification. I think it was at that point as simple as that. Yeah. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's also interesting, sort of, we had a sort of little bit of a discussion before we started, and it seems that I think all of you have come from a background of sort of high performance, and how that sort of transitions into how you wanting to be a coach. I guess, Sian, do you want to explain a little bit of how you've sort of gone from being professional, high level, into being a coach?
Yeah, I think I actually started coaching when I was quite young because after I finished school, I went to play in Italy for a couple of years, but there weren't really opportunities in women's football back then. There was no possibility of playing sort of professionally over here, and it was just something else. So, you know, as someone grown up, a bit obsessed with football, I love football, and I thought, oh, I'll do a bit of coaching. So whilst I was at university, I spent 4 or 5 summers going out to America and doing coaching with just little kids. It's good chance to sort of find your feet and learn things. And I was quite lucky. I was exposed to a few quite experienced coaches out there that you could learn from. So as I was playing for Arsenal, the Centres of Excellence began. So I started coaching on that and running that. And then I moved into, I did work full time for Arsenal for a while, working on the academy. And while I was still playing, I was coaching the Welsh national team. So mine was a bit weird. It sort of all just sort of merged into one. And initially it was probably because there were no opportunities to play football professionally. I thought, well, maybe I could coach professionally. So yeah, it was just sort of happened because I enjoyed football, really.
Yeah, and I guess a big part of it is that you sort of have sort of role models and people who sort of, when you're sort of playing, that you sort of recognize that whether it's inspiring you to carry on playing or sort of seeing a role of carrying on being a part of it. I think Mel and Sian, you both mentioned around there's a sort of passion to still be involved in some way, whether it's not being able to play or trying to find a way to maintain sort of ability to be involved in sport still. Fadi, was it sort of same for you? Was it different?
A little bit the same. So where Sian had the ability and she wanted to play football, I slightly had the ability and managers didn't think I did. So maybe it was a bit of a difference of opinion there. So I ended up saying I want to be in football. For me, it was, I would wake up in the morning and not want to wake up and go to work. Like that's the sort of thing. But if it was a 4 o'clock start to get on a coach to travel to go to a game, I was up, I was ready. So I knew in myself that I wanted to be involved in football no matter what, because it was a passion that I felt. So I think around 28, yeah, I was around 28. I just said, I'm going to just start doing badges. So I went for level 1, 29 went for level 2. And then I've been involved in coaching. I started academy stuff and then sort of small academy, small kids, and sort of worked my way up. So a lot of it's been volunteer work. So it's just your passion and how you want to go about it. But yeah, start from there and work your way up.
Got a question here for Danielle, sort of linked to this, around any advice around if you don't have the potentially sort of experience of playing, was there any sort of recommendations about how you might get involved in coaching? What sort of ways you'd recommend perhaps?
So for me, if you've got kids, you can get involved in the grassroots teams and things like that and coach from all the way under 8s, under 9s. There's always teams that are looking for coaches to help out on that volunteer basis. And also from there, just work on getting your badges, because for me, I think the level one is just an introduction, but once you get into the level 2, you really start learning different aspects of coaching and how you can really get involved in it a lot better. So definitely go for your badges so that you can try and work your way up. That'll be my advice.
Yeah, I think it depends on where you want to get to, you know. So if you just want to be involved in coaching, I think there's this misconception that coaching is about you telling the kids what to do, whereas actually it's about facilitating them to play and maybe extending their learning and their development. I mean, you see a lot of bad coaches in football in particular, in line drills, and they think they're coaching and actually the kids are standing still half the time. Whereas if you can facilitate them into playing a game, just change the rules, a bit of encouragement, maybe show them some skills, you know, certainly to get your foot on the ladder and start getting involved. You don't have to be an expert. Obviously, once if you want to move higher, then you have to understand there's a lot more to the game, and the technical side and the tactical side. But to get involved initially, sometimes you're better off with people who don't have so much technical knowledge, because they don't try and impart it incessantly on the children, and let them play, because that's ultimately how they learn to make decisions and become sort of independent players.
And especially with grassroots and children, it's about participation, as Sian says. So it's about fun, getting them to come. And I'm talking from a netball perspective, but my early memory of being a primary school player was smelly bibs and flat muddy balls. Now, how did I ever get past that to actually become pretty decent? And when I tutor coaches, even if you're coaching as a mum in a primary school, that's such an important job. Wash the bibs, get some decent balls and get them pumped up. And, immediately you've got children wanting to come back for another session. And that's how it should start. And we've got to think of all of those ways to engage people in returning, whether you're coaching a return to the sport game, like back to netball with adults, or the first touch of a ball at year one at primary school. We've got to think of ways that people are going to come back, and that's how it all starts, really. And if you can be that person, it doesn't matter really if you don't know very much about the game, because that is certainly from a netball perspective. You're not playing netball when they're age 6 and 7. They're too little, the rules are too complicated, but you're just getting them used to catching and throwing and an invasion game and using space. Does that help, Daniela? Or Danielle, sorry.
Yeah, I think
I like to say that the smelly bib still happens, by the way. And,
not in COVID times, it doesn't.
Yeah, I think there's a massive bit around coaching and what the skills are, and whether you need to have those sort of technical skills, are sort of especially at the beginning, is a sort of a bonus. I think having those abilities to engage people, and you mentioned sort of those little things around making sure it's a nice environment, it's that sort of first experience. And for some people, that one experience might put them off playing and being involved and being active. So things like that you sort of don't always consider, but
it's just being about approachable. I go to see some really top coaches coach, and they don't even speak to their players when they walk in the door. And I think, well, how are you expected to get any kind of rapport going with I make a point of saying hello, how are you, or some kind of quick acknowledgement of every single member of my group that walks through the door. And that wouldn't matter if I was coaching in a primary school tomorrow, or whether I was coaching an England team. It's basic, and those things have a huge impact on women and girls and whether they return. Huge impact. Coach was unfriendly. The coach didn't speak to me all evening. That's not uncommon.
I think that's a lot of confidence, isn't it? You see sometimes new coaches or coaches that have been just promoted to positions that don't quite know how to comport themselves, and it's almost like an us and them makes them feel more comfortable. I'm in charge, and I'm going to be seen to be in charge. And I think as you get more experienced as a coach, you relax it. People are just people. I mean, the people that I hated playing for were those ones that sort of spoke to you like you're a school child. Even as a senior player, there were times you go with certain teams and they speak to you like you're a school child. It's like, hold on a second, I take school children on trips. I can look after myself, and you can talk to me like an adult. So it's just people, isn't it? And it's just in a different situation.
I think you, as a coach personally, I think you need to find the difference between standards and how you want your standards to be seen, and then also how you want them to be spoken to and portrayed to the players. Because if you go in and you've got really, really high standards, but you don't build a rapport with the players, how are they going to understand you and understand how you want to do things? Which is literally what I'm going through at the moment, is trying to get the ladies to understand where I think they are and where they should be. And you have to build that rapport. I think it's so important. And even outside, I would message, some of my girls are injured at the minute, and they only come to training and they don't see the girls. They're in the back in the gym doing other things, but I'm on the phone to them even after training, because you're building that rapport with them just because they're not around and they're not in and around it. So yeah, it's definitely really, really important.
I guess when we're talking about sort of coaching and some of those skills that we've mentioned there, do we think there's any sort of particular skills which you've sort of really had to sort of hone in on when you're working with women in sport? Is there any things that you sort of had to sort of develop understanding of, or any sort of particular skills which, as a coach in female sport, that you've sort of realized that that's probably a bit more important when I'm working with this particular audience?
I think confidence. I mean, it's difficult because obviously often in football, everything came from the point of view of boys and men. Obviously, I grew up playing more with boys because back in those days there wasn't so much girls football. But I think confidence, generally girls tend to be a little bit less confident. And the other thing that I find is that they're so polite. If someone calls for the ball, they'll give it to them regardless of whether, and sometimes you have to say, be less polite, let's make the right decision. That's that, you know. So girls, I think, are very much, can be very much guided by friendships and friendship groups, and getting them to understand that, you know, the two things are separate. This is a game of football, and yes, you can whack them up in the air and you can still be their best friend after training, and those sorts of things. I think I do think confidence, when I've coached boys, they all think they're great no matter how bad they are. You know, so I think you're starting from two different positions. So the boys you have to bring down in order to develop, and the girls you have to build up often in order to develop.
Well,
yeah, I think women are different to girls, and so that's the first thing. Having coached a lot of children as well, and Sean's given some good examples about children, and that's the same when boys play netball. They come and they're better immediately because of all of those reasons, and it's really annoying because they're confident and cocky, and they've don't worry about whether they're playing with their friend or running around holding their friend's hand and all those things. So I think children are I'm not an expert in children. I have coached lots of children and I have a daughter, but she's grown up now. I'd say for women, oh my word, for adult women, it's a minefield. I think I've got a particular issue with language. I cannot bear it if people call them guys. Come over here, guys. That's just me, but I don't like it. But then what do you say? Do we say ladies? Do we say girls? So you've got to think about the language. So I say nothing. I say, could everybody just pop out? Right, we're ready to start. Let's go. And I avoid saying it now because I'm not quite sure what's PC anymore. I'm still working with a range of women between the ages of 18 and 38. Now that's huge. I've got an 18-year-old who's just passed her driving test and is in year 13 in the same squad as the most experienced English player in the country, who's 38. So one of my favourite coaching quotes anyway is treat everybody equally unequal, because there's no way I can treat those two the same way. I mean, I could go on and on. There's all sorts to consider around children, the fact that it's antisocial hours. We have parents that are still playing elite netball that are trying to juggle work, a husband, a child, travel, all of those things, to students that are doing very little except for playing netball, to full-time roses. So there's so much that women have to think about. And I'm just thinking about my own journey. And as a player and a coach, I wouldn't be able to do it without my husband. And we talk about that the other way around quite a lot, don't we? That women supporting men in key roles. Well, thank goodness my husband doesn't play sport. He's the most knowledgeable netball husband on the planet, but he really, I guess he's taken a bit of a back seat so that I can be out 4 evenings a week till ridiculous times. And I wouldn't be able to do it without him. And I guess other women in coaching and that are still playing have a similar experience. So you definitely need some support around you. It's not easy. And then I don't know if you want to go there with periods and hormones, but there's loads of science out there, but that's another whole webinar. But really something serious to consider about athlete well-being and training and performance, because there's lots of evidence about all of that stuff.
Yeah, there's to continue on to that. There's also weaker muscles within the ladies as well. So ACLs can go a lot quicker and a lot easier. Ankle, hips. Yeah. So I've got one girl who's actually my captain who's injured again for the third time this season, just because, and we have to do so much strength and conditioning with the girls to make sure that they avoid certain injuries, just because it's the way it is. It's unfortunately it's the way that the bodies of women are built, and you just have to adapt to it and learn and understand it a lot more. Because obviously with me, I've had one injury in my whole footballing career. When I've got girls within the whole squad, they've all had injuries, whether it's this season, last season, multiple. It's not just one. So yeah, you definitely have to have that as an understanding as well.
I think part of that, I mean, obviously there is the musculature around the knee and everything, but I think you've also got that sports development from an early age. You look at the movement patterns of girls, they're not necessarily encouraged to do sport from such an early age, and the different types of movements, you know, having that balance and that control, and some of them play very upright, and the way they play sports, and you know, obviously football is a massive one because of the impacts in lower body, so they're very vulnerable, but a lot of it's because they haven't grown up with the sort of sport to the depth that boys do. They're encouraged to do sports from such an early age, and to try so many different sports. I think that's a factor as well. I mean, you know, you've got a lot of girls now, like you say, over here getting ACL injuries because we're getting a little bit fitter, a little bit stronger, but actually it's just meaning the impacts on collisions are getting greater. They're not professionals, or, you know, beyond the top division, they're not professional, so they're not getting the development that they really need in order to counteract those sorts of impacts.
And I guess with a lot of the sort of discussion you sort of mentioned there, is that kind of stuff that should be engaged in coaching qualifications if they're working with particular groups? Is that stuff that people should be aware of a little bit more?
I think it's not on your level 2. It's not on your A for B. They don't talk about things like that. You adapt to it when you learn about it. Obviously, the longer you are in the game, the more you pick up and the more you understand. Mel and Sean have been in the game for longer than me, and they can see obviously the things that have happened throughout their careers. Whilst I've been in the game shorter period, but I can still see it. So you know it's there, you know it's happening. And I think you just need to adapt to your surroundings, because if you're with younger with children and you're working your way up, then from there they might have different needs and different aspects and different stuff, because like Mel was talking about with the menstrual cycle, that might not happen at 8, 9, 10 years old, but it might happen when they start getting into the teenage. So you need to see where the difference is and how to work that out.
Yeah, and there is actually we do have a webinar tomorrow which is all around those sort of topics around sort of the health and stuff. So if there's anyone who's here who wants to understand a bit more around that, we have got, I think there's the team next door at Performance Herts are going to do a bit of education around that. So feel free to join us tomorrow and we'll sort of go a little bit deeper into that. I think from that, I think it'd be interesting to hear about, we sort of mentioned around how we sort of introduce sport and try and make it as a welcoming experience as possible, but how do you think we can sort of keep people playing sport, and especially sort of women and girls? How do we keep people coming back, and what are those sort of key skills as a coach that we need to have to make sure people want to keep coming back and be engaged in sport, whether it's football, netball, any sport? What are those sort of key skills as a coach we think that people need to have and sort of really embrace?
I'll go, because then I need to leave.
Oh, sorry, you go on.
Is that all right, Sean? So I kind of alluded to it earlier, that absolutely the coach needs to be welcoming, make some kind of contact with players as they arrive and leave. Actually, I do a really, it takes seconds. And in fact, if a player doesn't, I'm talking about probably top end player, but if a player doesn't acknowledge my good evening, I'd go back to them actually. Well, it's about standards, as you talked about, Fadi, earlier, whether that's an 11-year-old or an adult.
Sorry, just to touch on that, I've coached some kids as well at the moment, and they have to come and they just give me fist bumps, all say hello, because the conversation I have with them is, if I was to come to your house and see your parents, would I say hello to them if I was to come in? Yes, I would. Same way, you've come here, you come and say hello to people. It's just having a little bit of respect.
Yeah, totally agree. And I'm quite keen on thank yous as well. And again, it doesn't matter who if I'm coaching my WASP squad, I expect them to say thanks, Mel, as they walk off. So I think getting the culture, it's a bigger conversation, isn't it, about having the culture right in your squad, having the values right. All of this is agreed, but I guess if you're just talking about a drop-in session, back to netball, back to football, whatever you want to call it, come and play type set. It's just really important that it's a welcoming environment and that the coach shows some really good interpersonal skills and interactions with the players in order to get them coming back. I mean, that's ultimately what we want them all doing. Is that too simple an answer?
No, I think that's exactly it. I think it is about sort of embracing those sort of core skills. And I think you mentioned whether it's technical skills, health bits and pieces, but in the core of it, I think that is sort of really important message that is around making it a welcoming experience. It's not always about coaching knowledge you have. It's about being a very good person and being able to engage people and keep them happy. Happy to let you go.
Sorry, go on.
Happy to let you go, Mel, if you need to.
Yeah,
pop
sorry.
back to training.
If anybody's got any specifics, Chris, after, I'm really happy to just take some emails or whatever. But sorry, I can't stay, everybody, but we've got a big game on Wednesday. I need to go.
No worries.
I'm a control freak. There's somebody's put, what cheat sheet should you put? Top of your tips, be a control freak. There's a reason why you're a control freak if you're a coach. See you all.
Cheers,
See you later.
I think on that, what brings people back, I think everybody has to know what the aims of the sessions are. So if you're doing sessions with kids or with players that just want to play for fun, do you know what they want to just play for fun? It's got to be fun, enjoyable, and welcoming. But what if they want to improve as players, then you need to involve, entail a little bit more learning so that they feel like they're moving forwards. I think as long as you know what the players are trying to achieve, what are they there for? It's different. Obviously, Fadi's working with the first team, so they're aiming to win. It's a different ball game, but you need to know, what's this session about? What do these players want to achieve? There's no right and wrong, because every group might be slightly different and the aims are different. Some might just be there for fitness. So I think it's as long as everybody's on the same page in terms of what that session's about.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with it, because we've got an under-23s team and they're all about development. So the results don't matter, and we don't look at the results in the table or anything like that. As long as the girls are developing so that they can move on to play for us, then that's what we're looking at. Where with us, it's all results, exactly like what Sean was saying. So, and then you've got other aspects that you need to look at, which is welcoming is one thing, but it's when they're there, how do they feel? Like, how is the interaction with the other girls? So I've had a new player that's joined recently, and I've got leaders in my team. So what I do is I take those leaders away, have a conversation with them, make sure that she feels welcomed, make sure that she's interacting with all the girls, etc. Like, integrate her within everyone else. Once one of the girls feel integrated and they don't feel secluded, they automatically want to come back. It's just the way it works. But if you have someone and they're always by themselves, and you've got groups of people here and here, and this person's always by themselves, they're just going to feel like, why am I here? What's the point? So they're just going to end up leaving. So you just need to ensure that there's always that integration that happens.
And I guess around that is an important point around this. It's not always about you having the control. It's about sort of giving players a bit of ownership around that as well. have you found that sort of being useful? I guess as sort of a man going into the women's game, is it easier to sort of give a bit of the ownership to the women to sort of help you out on some of those bits?
Yeah, no, 100%. I've got three. I always have three players that I look at as captain. So I have one captain and then two sort of vice deputy type captains, and they lead when I'm not there. So not as in I'm not there physically, but in general. So like group chats, they take ownership in things. So like we've got small things like rotors for cleaning the change rooms at the end of games. They look after that. A fines list for small things within banter groups and things like that. They look after that. They look after the money, and they're using that money for Christmas party that we're having next month. You know, it's just little things like that, but they are in charge of those things, and then they're also in charge of things on the pitch. So it could be one of the girls is having a bad day or whatever. They automatically just have it within them because of the way that I've tried to build stuff. Go and put their arm around the shoulder, have a little chat with them, etc. I will still do it as well, but having that support again, which is what we spoke about earlier, within your own team helps you progress further down the line as well.
Yeah, I think.
And also, sorry, just to say, it's also they buy into you, if that makes sense. So if they understand what you want, they buy into it, which means the rest of the squad buy into it as well. So it also helps.
Yeah, definitely. And I think sort of carrying on from, I think Mel just as she left, just talking about the question around sort of the cheat sheet and sort of biggest thing that you sort of put on your list, sort of as a recommendation of lesson learned. I guess from either experience of a coach who's sort of inspired you and be a great coach, or something that you sort of picked up yourselves as coaches, what would be the sort of top things that you'd sort of put on your lists?
Sean?
I think everything, because it's difficult, because when you're working with different age groups, there are probably different things that you would emphasize, you know. So I tend to work with players that are either senior players or that are in some sort of player development pathways, you know, so they want to be top players. And what do you need to get to the top of the game? So with the younger ones, I try and do a lot of stuff that's involved in decision making. I don't do a lot of stuff that's, you know, obviously I do a lot of technical individual work, but it is all about decision making early on, good habits, things like you know, in football, checking your shoulder, scanning, these sorts of things. They don't get used to doing that early. They're limited as to how far they can go later on. So it's involving activities. If you have them standing around not doing much or not thinking for long, you can't expect them to suddenly go into games and think for every minute they're out on the pitch. You know, it's getting them to understand, try and put them in activities that are making them constantly involved in the game, if not physically, then mentally, because that's what the game's about. So it's more about maybe how you coach. I mean, individually, I don't know what I've taken away from things. I think you have to know your own strengths and weaknesses as a coach. You know, so I'm not very loud. So I'm not the sort of person who'll go and have a big social chat. So I like to work with someone who maybe is more of a sociable person. You just have to make sure you've got the balance of your team, your coaching team and your playing team. You need that balance, don't you? It's like it's great having 11 technicians, but if you haven't got someone that's going to head the ball in the back process, same with your coaching team. You need to make sure that you've got a good balance in your team if you're working at the higher level. But yeah, it's so hard to, you know, a cheat sheet, I don't know, because it's very different what you do with your 11-year-olds to what you do with the senior players. So yeah, I don't know how to answer that one.
I think one point that should definitely go on there is something that Sean's sort of touching is structure. I think if you have things in place like so we have all of our coaches do two types of jobs. So they might coach on the day, and then we've got one that does the analyst, we've got one that does strength and conditioning, but they all coach at the same time. So they've all got two jobs, and that's the structure that we've gone with. And then again, like I said, I've come in, I've made 3 players more senior than the others. Again, a little bit of structure there. I just feel like if you go in and you have a plan and you have your own philosophy of how you want to do things, so it needs to be done this way, this way, this way, this way. And it sort of leads back to Mel saying, being a control freak, you definitely need to be in charge of everything and oversee everything at least, and make sure that it's all going swimmingly. Because the way that I see a club working is like a clock, with all of the cogs that are going. If one of those cogs fall off, they're not going to start spinning. So you need to make sure that they're all going at all times. And yeah, that's for me, that's the main point of a cheat sheet. Just make sure you've got the structure there and your own philosophy.
Yeah, I think that's an important point that I think Sean brought up as well, around you don't have to have all the skills as well. You don't have to be an expert in all fields of coaching. I think it is an important thing to sort of recognize that where your strengths are. So I think even if you're sort of a new coach coming into it or no experience in coaching at all, it's trying to figure out sort of what are your sort of real strengths. And if you do have weaknesses in particular areas, it's working as a team. If it's another parent who's helping you, grassroots, trying to use different people's skills, because across a grassroots team, you might have 11 parents at least. People have different skills. So if you've got a really innate ability to bring people together, I'm sure there's someone else who have a bit more sort of technical skills around that. So yeah, I'd say definitely don't be afraid of not knowing everything. No one does. Stick to your strengths, try and build some of those weaknesses, but don't be afraid of asking for help from other people, working as a team, because yeah, you can't do it all on your own. You're not going to get very far if you're trying to sort of struggle along on your own. I think just to sort of move on a little bit is around a little stat that I sort of saw earlier when I was doing a little bit of research towards this, was around so head coaches in women's football across the top leagues in Europe is around 72% male, but in England currently it's around 56% women. It's obviously a massive difference in England, and especially in the top league, that there's a lot more women coaching the women's game. Do you think there's a particular area where England, the FA, have done more work towards trying to encourage women into more performance coaching roles in football? Is there something different that you guys have seen in sort of your experience of being involved in that environment, or?
From my experience, I'm going to let Sean answer this, but I don't think there's enough women in the game, personally. That's my personal opinion. I think there should be a lot more. To hear that it's over 50% is actually quite staggering. I thought it was a lot lower than that, but that's from what I see. So, Sean, what's your views on it?
I think the FA's made a lot of effort over recent years. I mean, it's from my generation, there was very little help, very little assistance, very little encouragement to get involved. Also the timing of it, so when I finished playing, there was no professional league, therefore I couldn't go into, and people of that earlier generation couldn't go into full-time coaching. The chances of you getting involved in men's coaching at that point was probably slim to none as well. Therefore it wasn't realistically a career path. So you've now got this generation that are coming through. There's a professional league, and people like Casey, followed it through as she's finished playing, and that's a good thing. Personally, for my generation, it's frustrating because you sort of missed out on that. But there's definitely been a concerted effort over the last 5 years to get more and more women qualified and get them involved. I think the recognition has to be that at the moment, men have probably had the opportunities to have the more coaching experience, and therefore it's a little bit harder for women to get involved, and that's why it's probably been a bit slower to develop. And that's where I know there are some mentoring programs and things going on now, but that's all very well and good, but they've got to have jobs to go into that pay a wage that they can actually live off. Otherwise, they're not going to develop into full-time professional coaches. So it's having that route for young coaches as well.
Yeah, and I think that is sort of the interesting thing. I was sort of doing a bit of listening around topics, and think when you were saying earlier in your sort of career that women's football, earlier in your careers, women's football was under a separate body to the FA, and I think especially now where it is more closely connected, is getting a bit more recognition, you'd hope it would sort of continue on the sort of the pathway it is, and hopefully get more support, whether it is like you're saying, sort of mentoring roles and having pathways for people to get into coaching and stay in it professionally. Definitely makes a big difference. And I think we're hopefully getting near to seeing women starting to sort of push into the men's game as well, and hopefully show sort of skills and attributes that they can provide over there as well, because definitely showing some great quality from coaching you're sort of seeing, whether it's on TV, from punditry, from managers in top leagues. So hopefully we'll see a lot more of that.
I think in the next another 5 years time, definitely by 2025, there'll be a massive growth in it. I think at the moment in the game, especially in the women's game, the National League and the Championship have got funding from Barclays, but now the National League and the Championship, yeah, they've got funding, but now the National League, Women's Super League and Championship have got funding, but now the National League is going to get funding itself. So it's sort of working its way down, and then eventually it'll work its way down into grassroots as well, and it'll start filtering, which is what you want. So I really do think that in the next 5 years it will pick up again.
But the other side of that is, you know, and the boys, we've seen it happen with the boys, but we're doing it again with the girls, where you had part-time coaches coaching the boys came through, and, you know, England didn't have good enough players. Now you've got a lot more money, obviously, over the last sort of 15, 20 years since some of the foreign coaches came in. A lot more money has been invested at academy level. And now look at the players that we've got coming through in the men's side. But still on the women's side, you've got people having to do it part-time. Yeah, so again, the quality players are really built down below. And if you haven't got full-time expert coaches working down there, it's going to limit how far the England team will go. But that's also where you get your sort of you learn how to coach, and you can develop your game and your coaching skills and come up through the age groups. But if they're having to do that on top of a full-time job elsewhere, I mean, it does make it hard. There are not going to be many people who are going to be able to go straight from playing straight to coaching in WSL. Therefore, they need to have other routes to go through. It will help the players, it will help the development of players, and it would also help the development of coaches. There need to be, some full-time jobs as there are in men's development. There needs to be that in the academies and RTCs for the girls as well.
So I think at the moment, especially like TV stations like Sky, for example, they're looking at having a new percentage of how many men and how many women that they actually employ and what they do as roles and etc. But you don't really have that in football at the moment. It's let's get a couple of women in here because we need to just look like we're bringing them in. But I think if you really had a better structure within that, and you really said, look, we need to have more women in the game. Let's try and support them. Let's try and give them the development that they need to get them into these roles. Then they might want to go and do it as well. Because I think a lot of them are just like, I have to compete with all of these men that have a lot more experience than me. I'm not going to get the opportunity. So yeah, that's my thoughts on it anyway.
Yeah, I think if sort of new coaches are interested in sort of finding out more about women at the top of coaching game, who are the sort of people you'd sort of pick out, and who would you sort of recommend for people to sort of keep an eye out, sort of read a bit more about, and sort of have as sort of role models within sort of women's football?
It's difficult because obviously people like Casey have come through playing at a high level, and that's the thing. Most of the managers that are involved with WSL at the moment have come through playing at a high level and then have stepped and moved across into coaching. There aren't that many. I'm just trying to think. There was I'm really bad with names. The girl that was at Bristol, I'm not sure she played at a high level, but she came at quite a circuitous route. It's interesting, she was working with a really small national team somewhere down in the Southern Hemisphere and moved across, so it's hard. I think it's harder for women and for, to take that career path, just because there are currently less opportunities. I mean, they are growing, obviously, but if they're going to be able to do it properly and pursue it properly, it would be nice to see more full-time roles going to girls, going to, young coaches, even if it was to work alongside a mentor, just to move them up through, rather than always having to do it as a part-time thing on top of a full-time job.
What the FA are doing at the minute is they have BAM advisors and things like that. So where you might have a lot of players of ethnic minority, but as well as women, they're both combined into that, and they allow them to try and support them within their progression. But there's coaches out there that are top in the game. Emma Hayes is one. Tanya Oxtoby is another one. They've been in the game for a long time. Sean's one of them as well. Played and now England under-15s manager. So it's the pathways are there, and the support is there, and it will get better. But you need to have the hunger and desire to push yourself as well.
I think we sort of spoke a little bit around it, but what do you think sort of Sean, coming from sort of teaching background, sort of some of those transferable skills, what do you think some of those sort of other roles that people might have and sort of have their jobs, what do you think they could sort of other roles that people could transfer into sort of coaching and sort of really help out, whether there's their child's team or want to get into coaching?
I mean, I actually came from coaching into teaching effectively. Because I coached while I was at university. It was that made me think, maybe I'll try a bit of teaching, because I enjoyed actually helping and teaching the kids. But, coaching is teaching. So it's obviously a different format to my day job, but that's ultimately what it's about. You don't have to be an expert. You have to be enthusiastic. You have to be positive. It needs to be about the children, about their development, but you don't have to be the most skillful, most technically gifted player, or even have that knowledge in order to give a positive experience, and allow those kids to develop. They'll develop from playing, if they're in a safe environment and they're encouraged to do the right thing. So even when it doesn't quite come off, you're encouraging them and saying, well done for trying. That's how kids learn, and there needs to be less pressure on this is the way it should be done. You don't have to be an expert to be able to help the kids to develop. You can show them a clip. Oh, let's try this skill. So if it's something that you're not confident to do, we'll show them. You've got technology nowadays; it's at your fingertips. Send them all a clip. We're going to practice this one for homework, or so it's just understanding that you don't have to be Pep Guardiola in order to actually give a really, really great experience to youngsters and get them involved in the game and get them progressing. You just have to support them and encourage them and get them to understand that mistakes don't matter.
I mean, I've got nothing else to say to that. That's literally everything. That's what you need to do. I think go in there with confidence and do the things that you would want to be done to yourself if you was in that situation. So if you wanted a coach, how would you want to be coached? And for me, the way that I see things is, if someone helps me to get to where I want to get to, then I'm going to respect them a lot more than someone that just says, oh yeah, do that, do this. There's no support there. So yeah, I'm definitely the same as Sean.
I think I'll just sort of bring up a few things. So as this is part of our sort of This Girl Can campaign for this week, and we've sort of got festivals where women and girls can try out different activities, our sessions we're doing. Obviously we've got these sort of webinars going on as well during the week. There was an article that UK Coaching posted, I think, a couple of years ago, but it was all around sort of 4 essential things that sort of ways to get women more active. I think a lot of them we've sort of really touched on, but I thought I'd just sort of touch upon them quickly and see if there's anything we've missed. So the first one we've sort of spoken around sort of creating a welcome environment, and that's sort of one of the big things that I know Mel was really pushing, and we've all mentioned around that. Understanding the reasons why women want to come to session. I think we've discussed that as well. I think it's important to understand whether someone's coming in to be a performance level athlete, have ambitions to be a professional, or whether it's just something they want to do, enjoy friends, want to be active. So I think that's a massive thing, is understanding why they're there. There's no reason why they can't be ambitious and want to be professional, but it's important to sort of understand that at sort of the outset. You're not sort of running social sessions for someone who wants to be competitive. Third one was being aware of the fear of being judged. I think as well, we've sort of discussed around how we need to make sure that it is a sort of welcome environment, that the sort of players understand and builds that sort of capacity of supporting people within the group. It's not all about sort of you as a coach controlling everything, but try and make it a nice environment. People can make mistakes. They don't be afraid that they have to have a certain level to be part of the group. Anyone can be willing to be a part of whatever they're doing. And finally, definitely something that was discussed earlier on was around build women's confidence. I know Mel was big around saying that that she'd definitely seen that it's a massive difference around sort of building women up. And sometimes it was, I think Sean as well, you sort of said around, sometimes it's sort of taking the boys down a level to make sure they're sort of understanding that there's sort of what the aim of the sort of sessions, what the development is, to make sure they sort of have a bigger picture of where you want to take them to. So without knowing it, you guys have absolutely nailed it, and some of the discussion points without me even sort of bringing out some of those up. I will open up and say if there's any questions for anyone attending today, and if you have any sort of particular things you want to know more about that we might not have covered, please feel free to either drop something in the chat, or there's a Q&A function as well, so you can happily post it on there and we'll pick up. But I'll just finish off. If you're sort of taking on a coach or wanting to try and support someone into coaching at the moment, where would you sort of recommend them to go into? Would you say jump into coaching qualifications straight away? Would you say try it, get a bit of experience? Where do you reckon sort of first steps in? What do you reckon?
I think getting involved with a club and maybe going and assisting someone that's already working with the team, so you can see how it functions, seeing how sessions are planned and put together. Going straight into a course, I'm not sure you'd have the context, you have to quite understand, unless you played a lot, in which case you know how they're structured. But I would say go in and get involved at a local club, or if you've got children at your school, see how the teachers do it, see how the coaches do it. You could start to take little parts of the session, see if you can recreate a session you've seen that coach do. So can you recreate it with maybe another group, those sorts of things. And then, yes, certainly start to get some coaching badges. As apart from anything, it qualifies you if you want to go further. But also there are bits of information there that you probably things you haven't necessarily thought of, and all the essentials like the first aid and the child protection and all those sorts of things that actually are so important. The parents want to know, first of all, their children are safe, and then they're having fun. That's got to be the priority. So working with people with a little bit more experience than yourself, but accepting no one expects you to be an expert. I'm not an expert, and I've been coaching for a very long time, so no one expects you to know everything, and that's fine. The kids just want to have fun, and you can help them do that.
Yeah, I'm the same. I think if you go in, I started the same way. So I started as volunteer and went in as an assistant. I ended up getting a management job, still in grassroots, taking everything that I did while playing, whilst also doing all that assistant stuff and trying to build my own way. And from there, I started doing my badges, doing everything and taking it off from there. But I definitely feel like, this is my opinion, I feel like the level one is just an understanding. you will just get for football anyway, you'll just get an understanding of how it all works, etc. And then once you get on the level 2, that's when it starts getting a little bit more technical, a little bit more tactical in terms of things that happen within the game. But definitely try and get the experience first, and then your badges after.
Yeah, I think I'd add on top of that is, take advantage of all the expertise around, whether it's people in your club, people in different environments. There's so many people who do have good experience that can sort of share it with you. So don't be afraid to ask to go and watch someone's session. Most coaches out there will be happy enough for someone to come visit a session, watch, and just sort of understand. So never be afraid to ask. And I think definitely here, but especially externally from all the coaches across Hertfordshire, and a lot of the people I've met within sort of coaching background are always happy to sort of welcome people in, even if it's not in your sport. Like, always feel free to ask, and if there's anyone who is interested in coaching and wanting to sort of visit other people's sessions, always feel free to message me, and I can always link you up with people across the county who can definitely help you. If it's in a particular sport, particular audience you want to work with, there's plenty of people willing, so always feel free to ask. I don't think we've had any questions yet, so is there anything else you guys want to add in before we finish?
Just don't give up at the first hurdle. That's my one gripe with a lot of things that happen. A lot of people just, they fall in, they really want to do it, and then something happens and it doesn't go their way, and then they're just like, it's not going to work. It's the way of life. Some you might apply for clubs that you really thought you was going to get in, and then you don't. You're going in as a volunteer. You didn't like the environment. You didn't like the way they coach. You thought you wanted to do something different. That just probably wasn't the right club for you. Just don't give up, and keep striving to be what you want to be and what you believe in. Like, always have your beliefs at the forefront of what you want to do.
Rishan?
I think, like I say, if you just want to get involved at the lower level, with the youngsters and doing it for fun and participation, then go for it. You don't have to be an expert. If you are interested in maybe making it a career, then please don't feel that volunteering will be part of it. You have to pick up your hours, you have to pick up some experience, go and take any opportunity you can, as Fadi said, to watch more experienced coaches, and steal their sessions, get ideas, build up a little repertoire of sessions that you can use as well. So it depends on what your aim is, really, but volunteering will be a part of your path, whether you want to go professional or whether you want to go just with local clubs, because ultimately it's quite a popular thing. Coaching is quite popular. People want to be involved in sports because they love it. So you need to pick up that experience wherever you can.
I think on that as well, it's not the be all end all. If you're not getting paid for it, you can get other wins from it. I know I've been volunteering pretty much my entire coaching time, and having been offered money to pay and coach and stuff. So it's not always about getting paid to do the coaching. Sometimes it is just wanting to give back. So don't always feel pressured to having to move up through levels as well. It's perfectly acceptable to stay in grassroots sport and really sort of develop young players into really loving sport. There's no pressure on anyone to move into professional, semi-professional sport. It's definitely a skill set within someone. If they have that skills to develop young people, there's no pressure on having to commit more time if you don't want to. So don't be forced into having to go into different environments if it's not really comfortable with.
Just remember that most children won't make it, even if you're working with elite pathways. Most children won't make it, so it's got to be fun anyway, and that's how they'll learn best too. So just remember this: if you work with children, they're children.
Definitely. All right, we're really happy to sort of have you guys on and talk to all around sort of women's coaching sport. Definitely been some really great insight from all of you. So thank you, Fadi and Sean, for joining us. And if there is any questions, if you've perhaps not wanted to share them on here, feel free to sort of email them across. Should have all my details. But I'll be in contact. I'll follow up with everyone who's attended. So feel free to ask any questions then. Thanks everyone for joining us, and thanks for all the panelists for joining and giving some really useful insight. It's been really inspiring. Thanks.
Pleasure. Thank you guys. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.